In my previous video about the handlebar conversions for my Gen 1, I showed you the Woodcraft zero offset handlebars that I've bought. So we're going to do a comparison. What have I achieved, if I've achieved anything at all? So here we go. We've got the standard top clamp with a non-adjustable fork tube hole so you can't slide the forks up and down. And then you can get some aftermarket top clamps. Now this one is the Roaring Toys and it's beautifully made, and it has a slight angle difference where the bars, the stock bars, go into the top clamp. Okay, but they are actually slightly different in their angle as well as slightly forward, and this is where all the drama comes when you're trying to fit decent brakes on the Gen 1, because the Gen 1 is bad. So we're going to start measuring and try and give you guys some figures so that when you ask what have I done, I can actually say yes, we've moved it back an inch and things like that. So here we go, let's get into it. Now I had to think about this, how am I going to do this? And I had a look at an adventure bike video on measuring the handlebars, and I used some of those ideas, but the height is what concerns me, that I had to think a bit. So I went and bought the Undertriple clamp stand. Never had one of these before, and they're a little bit tight under here, but it works, and we can lift the forks up. Okay, so now the wheel is off the ground. These aren't ceramic bearings either. See what happens when you don't have the brakes dragging, just spins easy. So the forks are now taken out of the equation because we haven't got any suspension movement up and down while I work on the bike. You know, the sag of the suspension, because the stand is underneath the triple clamps. So I know the back is still suspended through the swing arm, but I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. Okay, so the measuring from the ground is now set. Doesn't move, nice and steady. Now we have to do the setback, the width and the angle. So I went and bought some aluminium extrusion, 3mm, something fairly rigid, and we put that across there like that, and then I can measure the setback, and I'm going to choose the steering stem because that will be the constant, that's not going anywhere. So we measure back and we can get the widths and we can get the angles. But the problem is, because it's not an adventure bike, it's a Hayabusa, it hits the tank. So I have to take the tank off so we can get all these measurements laid down on paper, and we can have a look at what we've got. Now I keep calling it the setback, but other people call it the reach. But we'll measure that and we'll just stick to metric. I find that easier. So it's going to be 135 from the forward face of the thread of the steering stem to the front edge of this aluminium, and I get 135mm. So I'll write that down. Don't worry, I'll put it up on a big piece of paper so we can see the figures a bit later. Now to measure the height, I don't really want to measure the end of the bar end plastic plug. I really want to go to the aluminium to keep it fair because of the removable weights on the standard bars, and I have aluminium weights, bar ends on my on my bikes. I can't stand the heavy steel ones that they come standard, just way too heavy. But I just want to measure up in there for the height. So we're going to go up there like that, straight up and down, and we get 10-15 millimetres. Okay, the next thing we need to do is to get this angle. And I'm just using my old welding clamps to hold the angle on, and then we have there like that, and then a simple adjustable bevel to get the angles. I didn't want to buy anything too fancy. And we're just going to use this to measure the angles. Then I'll transfer that over onto a piece of paper. So we get the angle of the sweep, as they call it, that way or that way, depending. It's more preferable to go more flatter, I find, than this tight, narrow setup. With the stock bars, the angle is the same on both sides. Obviously, it's one piece, the angles are the same. But with the clip-ons, which can spin around, I have to make sure that I can make them even. I know use having one a little bit back and the other one a little bit forward. Okay, make it even with the bevel. Then I've marked onto the top triple clamp where the clamp is, and then same on this side, it's marked with a little paint pen, and I now know that I got, when I assemble it all, the clip-ons will be the same on both sides, because the standard clip-ons you get from Kawasaki or Suzuki or whatever is that clip-ons are pegged underneath, either by just a simple peg or a bolt system underneath, and that locates each clip-on the same on both sides. But because these turn, we need some sort of reference. Okay, so we've got some measurements now of the factory top clamp. I've got also the measurements for the top clamp of the aftermarket style. And then thirdly, the Woodcraft zero offset bars. Now I've got across the top line here, we've got the stock top clamp, the aftermarket, and the Woodcraft. And then finally the difference between them of the stock to the Woodcraft. I just ignore the aftermarket for the difference, so we'll just go from the maximum. So the first line is the setback or the reach. The stock is 86 millimeters and the Woodcraft is 135 millimeters. So that brings it back to 49 millimeters back from the steering stem, which is 1.93 inches back. So approximately 2 inches back, okay? The width is 630. Now with the aftermarket top clamp, with the stock bars, it still gives a different reading because of the angle is different. And then the Woodcraft of 740 millimeters, because they're a wider bar, so that's obviously a bigger width, a wider width of 110 millimeters or 4.33 inches. So that was going to be a given because the bars are wider. Now the height, if the stock from the ground up is 978, and the Woodcraft, they're very adjustable, and I've got them on the maximum height adjustment up. It's 1015, gives 37 millimeters difference, which is 1.46, which is basically 1.5 inches higher than stock. So 1.5 inches higher than your stock. So that should be good for your neck and wrist, a bit more comfort there with that height increase. And then the sweep, now I've just measured from those angles that I showed you before in the video. The stock angle is 38 And the Woodcraft, but again, being mindful that it's adjustable, is 28. So there's a less of an angle of 10 degrees. So that's going to be, instead of bars like that, it's more flatter. So I've reduced it by 10 degrees. So once again, I think that'll even up the pressure on the outside of the hand to the inside. So I think that's a good thing as well. So it's looking, should have more comfort there, and I should have more comfort with the setback and more leverage with the width. So I think that's a bit of a winner. Now I've already done the previous videos and I'll put them up. If you want to have a look at the background behind all this video, there's 2 videos that I've done explaining what I'm doing, and this is video number 3. So number 4 will be fitting it up onto the silver bike over there, now that I've sort of proven what I've got going here. I'll also do some measuring of the weights too at the end. We'll just get some comparison of the weights, because the stock setup compared to a single top clamp will make a big difference too. So thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks guys.